I'm a journalist and survival in this field is brutal. Editors don't care about safe stories, they want the ones no one else dares to chase. 2 weeks ago, I left the city to find exactly that. A story overlooked, strange enough to matter, unsettling enough to make them notice me. So I packed my life into the car and drove. By the time I reached the town, the sky was bruised purple and orange. A crooked sign sagged by the roadside. Welcome to Ash Grove. Population. The number had long since faded. Not exactly the kind of greeting that puts you at ease. I reminded myself I was here for a story, not ghost tales or superstitions. But as the last light drained from the horizon, a knot had already formed in my stomach. What unsettled me most wasn't the rule itself. It was the way people reacted when I asked about it. Their faces stiffened, eyes skittering away like I'd said something dangerous. That's when I realized this wasn't just another story about fading towns and harmless folklore. The landlord was the first to warn me. He was tall, hunched, his fingers twitching like he was working through a silent prayer. When he handed me the keys, his voice cracked. Just follow the rule. I asked what rule. He leaned closer, his breath damp and sour with dust. 3:30 to 4. Every day. Lights off. Don't test it. Then he gave me a look, flat, cold, heavy as stone, and left without another word. I jotted in my notebook, half mocking. Local superstition. Lights off or die. Landlord clearly unstable. But later at the diner I mentioned it offhand. The waitress froze, her smile vanishing between one breath and the next. The tray in her hands tilted, nearly spilling coffee. Don't risk it, she whispered. Her voice was low, clipped, almost trembling. After that, she avoided me entirely. From behind the counter, she only watched, her eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Fear, pity, or maybe both. I felt as if she felt my intent. The next day, I wandered into the gas station, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of fuel. A bell tinkled as I opened the door, but no one looked up. Behind the counter, an old man chewed tobacco in silence, his eyes tracking me like a predator sizing up its prey. When I asked about the rule, he spat into the dirt. Better to lose power than lose your soul. Like everyone else, he ended with the same warning. Lights off. Don't test it. At 3:25 that evening, I turned off every lamp and bulb in the house. Not because I believed the whispers, but because the woman at the diner had leaned close before I left and said, keep them off just for the first night. Don't make yourself a target. During that half hour, it felt as if the entire town had stopped. Shops shuttered, curtains drawn tight, every window dimmed. The streets lay empty, silent, as though life itself had been drained away. Ash Grove wasn't a town anymore. It was a graveyard wrapped in darkness. I woke with the sun leaking thinly through the curtains, a pale orange glow that made the dust in the room drift like tiny ghosts. I brushed my teeth, showered, and dressed, trying to shake off the heaviness of the night before. I followed a narrow side street and knocked on a weathered door, the blue paint peeling like old skin. An older woman answered, her hair streaked with gray, eyes tired yet gentle. You must be the new journalist, she said, stepping aside. Come in before it gets too late. Her house smelled of fresh bread and herbs, a rare warmth in a town that otherwise felt hollow. She set a plate of stew and bread before me. Eat, keep your strength up, she urged. But even as she smiled, her gaze kept flicking toward the curtained windows. Her hands trembled as she set down the spoon. Then, leaning closer, she whispered, don't be caught looking out after midnight. The window hour is no time for strangers. Her words hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed, as though she had given me both food and a warning in the same breath. When I asked why, she pressed her lips tight as if regretting the words. After a long silence, she added in a low voice, my grandfather never listened. He went out the night of the accident and never came back. That was the last anyone saw of him. We talked for hours. She told me stories about the town, some ordinary, some strange, all tinged with fear. Her voice softened when she spoke of her grandfather, but her eyes never left the windows. Every now and then she glanced at the clock, muttering, "Not long now, not long." I couldn't sleep that night. It was my third in Ash Grove. I had followed the rules. No lights between 3:30 and 4 o'clock. Nothing happened, at least nothing I could see. The next morning she invited me for breakfast. Finally I asked, why only that time? Why exactly from 3:30 to 4? She swallowed hard, hands trembling. "That's when the corridor opens," she whispered. "Corridor?" I asked. She nodded. "A corridor between worlds, a thin place where the barrier between the living and the trapped dead grows weak. From 3:30 to 4 o'clock, it opens just enough for them to slip through. They feed on any light they can find. People who stay unseen survive. Those who don't, never come back." Her eyes flicked to the windows as if expecting shapes to press against the glass. "It's only 30 minutes, she said softly, "but that's enough to take everything if you aren't careful." I spent the day wandering the abandoned old mines, searching for a story. By the 7th day I had obeyed every rule. No lights, no movement, no noise. But my patience was unraveling. I needed proof, something to write, something worth sending to my editor. The next evening I walked to the edge of town, to the old bridge where the river cut through the fields. Mist clung to the guardrail. An old man stood there, the same one I'd seen at the gas station. His eyes were wary, sharp. "You're poking around too much," he muttered. "Looking for stories that aren't meant to be told." I pressed him for answers about the town's history. Finally he sighed. "If you want to understand Ash Grove, you need to know about the mine collapse. 50 years ago the mine caved in. 47 men were trapped underground. 34 made it out. 13 never returned. 4 months after," he said, voice tightening, "families swore they heard knocking under their floors at night. Kids claimed they saw pale faces pressed against their windows." He paused, jaw tight. "Some believe the collapse didn't bury them, it just left them stuck. Between here and somewhere worse. My cousin, maybe 16 at the time, was with 5 kids from the summer camp that night. They dared each other to keep their lanterns lit past the rule. He said the shadows moved differently, like they were reaching for him. He panicked, dropped his lantern, and the flame went out. That's why he made it to morning. Darkness hit him. The rest were dragged wherever the light still burned. By sunrise only he returned. I've lived long enough to see the foolish die. Remember, boy, darkness protects. Light kills." That evening I stayed with the old man. The roads to town were worse than I expected, muddy and narrow, and he insisted I shouldn't risk the walk alone. His house was small, cluttered, but safer than the empty streets at night. He whispered of the lost ones, how the window hour awakens them, and how any light you kindle only feeds them. That night I stayed in the small house, every lamp and bulb turned off by 3:25. The old man's warnings echoed in my mind. At 3:30 the house was silent, too silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I sat on the floor, notebook in hand, pretending to write, but my eyes kept drifting to the curtained windows. Then I heard it, a faint scraping like claws on wood coming from the loft above. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to stay still, not to look. The sound grew closer, deliberate. I wanted to tell myself it was the cat or a branch brushing against the roof, but I knew better. This was different. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The seconds stretched like hours. Outside, the mist drifted across the empty streets, shadows pooling under the street lamps I hadn't dared to light. And then, just for a moment, I saw it. A shape pressed against the window. Its head tilted, studying me. I couldn't make out a face, but its intent was clear. It was drawn to the light I might show to any spark of carelessness. 3:59. The sound faded. The shape vanished. When the alarm buzzed 4 o'clock, I didn't rush to turn the lights back on. My hands shook too much. My mind replayed the shape, the long limbs, and the way it had lingered. For the first time, I understood the old man's words. Darkness protects. Light kills. Was he one of the 13, the ones the town never speaks of? The ones they say were swallowed by the woods years ago and never buried? Was it really flesh I saw, or only what remains when flesh is gone? And what if his words weren't a threat at all? What if they were a reminder? Should I have stayed? I don't know when I dozed off, still turning the questions over in my head. When morning came, I woke to the smell of frying bread. The clock read 6 o'clock. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, but it felt thin, like it hadn't fully earned its warmth. The old man was already at the table. He didn't greet me. Just nodded once as if I'd passed some kind of test by making it through the night. "Eat," he said, sliding a plate toward me. The food was hot, the coffee bitter. But I couldn't shake the thought that I hadn't heard him moving in the kitchen at all. After breakfast, I drove back home. When I turned the corner, I froze. Mrs. Calloway? Her porch was swarmed with neighbors, police lights stuttering against the morning sky. One man edged closer to me, lowering his voice as though the air itself might overhear. "Did you see her last night?" he asked, eyes darting nervously toward the crowd. Then he leaned nearer, his breath sharp against my ear. "No one saw her after the window hour." The police gave me their version of what happened. They said Mrs. Calloway was old, fragile, living alone. Her heart simply gave out during the blackout. I pressed the officer again. Why the blackout? Why her house first? He only adjusted his cap, jaw tight. "Old wiring, bad storms. Happens. That's all." And that was the end of it. I was leaving when a woman from across the street stopped me. "You want to know about Calloway?" she whispered. "The police won't tell you. But I saw it." After listening to her version, I decided I should talk to others in the street. Most of them avoided my eyes. Some said nothing and shut their doors. But a few whispered pieces. The more I asked, the stranger it became. But the way they spoke, the way they looked at her house even now, it told me one thing. They were afraid. Afraid in a way that facts alone couldn't explain. And if you ask me what happened that night, this is the only way I can piece it together. It had been a stormy night. The wind rattled the shutters and rain lashed across the town like claws on glass. Mrs. Calloway's generator failed just before 3:30. Her house plunged into darkness, the only protection she had. Panicked, she scrambled for candles and lamps, trying to stay safe. But the window hour had begun. The light she brought to survive marked her instead. The whole street went dark except her house. Plates of uneaten food lay on the table, and her chair was empty. She must have died that night. By morning they carried her out. I still wish I hadn't looked. Her mouth was split wider than a human jaw should allow. Her eyes were black, yet swimming with something alive inside. By sunset, her porch was empty. A for sale sign leaned against the steps. No one spoke her name again, like she never existed. That night I couldn't sleep. For a moment I froze, imagining myself in her place. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face again. One wrong flicker, one light too many, and I could be the next story the town whispers about. The rules carved themselves deeper into my mind. Stay unseen, stay silent, no lights. Curiosity could kill, and I had already felt it clawing at me. I realized with a cold dread that the warnings weren't just superstition. Darkness had saved her once, maybe many times, but a failure, even for a few minutes, had been enough. I stayed hidden at the edge of the cemetery, watching the small crowd gather. Even here, no one came close to her grave. The coffin was lowered. I could see the few brave enough to approach the grave, shaking hands, quick prayers, and hurried departures. My chest ached. She was gone. Grief twisted into questions. What had she seen in those last moments? with the lamp still burning. Sleep wouldn't come until I knew. When I pressed the sheriff, he waved me off. But later, I noticed his house, the windows smothered with blackout curtains nailed tight. After the funeral, I spent my days digging into Ash Grove's past, reading old newspapers, speaking with residents, and exploring abandoned houses and the collapsed mine. Every story hinted at the same chilling truth. The window hour had claimed lives for decades, leaving shadows in every home and grief etched into every face. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that the town's warnings were not superstition, they were survival. But then I discovered something that chilled me to bones. I found a file no one had touched in decades. Yellowed pages, brittle edges. It was the work of another journalist who once came here chasing the same story. He never finished it. The handwriting changed midway, tighter, uneven, trembling. The file wasn't his though. It was his daughter's notes. The last page in the file described how they found the journalist's body. His mouth torn wider than any jaw should open. His eyes described as black and unsettled, like something moving inside them. The description froze me, because it was identical to what I had just seen at Mrs. Calloway's funeral. I put the file down, my pulse hammering. Coincidence? I knew better. 2 deaths, decades apart, yet the bodies looked like mirror images. This rule, the connection between light and death, became the single terrifying constant in all of Ash Grove's tragedies. And as I sat there, the lamp beside me flickered once, twice. Then it went out. I should have panicked, but I didn't. I felt safe. Safer than I ever had beneath the glow.